Emperor's New Groove is a friggin' awesome movie and one of my favourites from the entire Disney franchise. Released in 2000, it broke the usual Disney formula with its constant fourth wall breaks, its own admittance that the plot barely made sense at times, and some seriously impressive character growth. Especially that last one. I cannot stand these goody two-shoes protagonists who can never do wrong. I want characters to learn from their mistakes and become better people because of their experiences. And The Emperor's New Groove gives me just that. So what do I think about the PS1 tie-in? Well, for the 100 or so people who voted for The Emperor's New Groove to be reviewed next, you'll be happy to know I really enjoyed playing this game. Well, most of it. There was one section that I think will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life, but other than that, a solid and entertaining game that I think both kids and adults alike can appreciate. The movement, for the most part, feels great. With decent speed, turning and jumping capability, the game tries not to hold your hand when it comes to certain puzzles, and the humour that the film is so well known for is present throughout this 5 to 6 hour adventure.
Oh, shucks! Not another llama tied to a log!
And I thought I was unique.
Now, that's not to say I don't have any issues with the game at all. And no matter what you play, there's always something that can be improved upon. But out of, 15 bad points I have written down like the negative Nelly that I am, I'd say only 3 of those were particularly egregious. But before we jump into the good, the bad and the ugly of The Emperor's New Groove on the PS1, let's take a moment to look into its development. So, this Disney tie-in was made by Argonaut Games, the developers of many a childhood game, such as Star Fox on the SNES, Croc Legend of the Gobbos and its sequel Croc 2, personal favourites of mine, I love you Croc, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and its sequel Chamber of Secrets, and even... Oh no. It seems the combination of commercial failures such as Catwoman during the mid-2000s and the high cost of developing games on the PS2 caused major issues for Argonaut Games, and in a last desperate bid to try and save the company, the entire staff was let go in 2004 to try and stave off bankruptcy. Unfortunately, it was a little too late, with Argonaut Games liquidating by the end of the year before finally ceasing to exist in 2007. Well, that's a bleeding shame. Development of The Emperor's New Groove was a fairly bog-standard affair, but one interesting thing to note is that the game runs on the same engine as Croc 2, something Argonaut Games did frequently with other titles they developed. The game was released in late 2000 and early 2001, and met with mixed reviews from critics. Funnily enough, one of the criticisms was aimed at the game's short length, something I have to disagree with personally because if anything I felt the game went on for a bit too long. Now that could just be because I sat through it for 5 hours straight with virtually no breaks, and you do sort of get to that point where you're like, are we ever going to see the ending? But I also think me being frustrated by the game's length was exacerbated by the lack of variety in terms of level design. Well, there was also the problem with certain levels just being flat out copies of another, but I'll get to that later. Now, don't get me wrong, apart from a few niggly things such as these fairly uninteresting skyboxes, I think the levels, known as chapters in this game, are pretty well designed for what they are, and they range from hilltop villages, foreboding jungles, river rapids, snow-sprinkled mountains, and finally the city and all it contains itself. The problem I have with the level design is that it's been copied and pasted throughout each section. For example, the village took me just over 40 minutes to complete, split into 4 levels. That doesn't sound too bad until you compare each level's design. Not really much going on in terms of variety, and I personally feel the devs could have either offered more in the visual department to help make each one stand out, or possibly cut a few areas here and there to try and alleviate that feeling of, I swear I've been here before. To be honest though, if I'd played this game as a kid, I probably wouldn't have thought twice about the lack of variety in each section. And to be fair, the devs do try to spice up each level by adding in various challenges. You've got races, platforming puzzles, a section where you have to mash the buttons so bloody hard your fingers threaten to fall off, and even some surprisingly enjoyable sections where Kuzco is turned into a different type of animal, making use of new abilities in order to traverse through certain areas. For example, the frog transformation is slow when it comes to walking, but can hop a fair distance, and chaining hops will allow him to cover even more ground. The rabbit's transformation, my personal favourite, allows Kuzco to perform a mega jump and then use his ears to hover to different platforms. The tortoise transformation is only used for chase sequences, and it's probably the most iffy of the bunch. Not because being a tortoise is super slow business, mind you. On the contrary, once Kuzco gets going, he's pretty bloody fast. But because someone on the development team forgot to turn the draw distance up to a reasonable distance so I can actually see what's dead ahead of me. This is an extremely irritating issue during sequences like this, and becomes a glaring problem near the end of the game. But I'll talk about that in a bit. First, we need to discuss the game's title screen and story, yay! Well, there's not much to say about the title screen actually, though Patcher does appear to be having trouble with a particularly amorous butterfly.
No, don't do it. I'm a virgin.
You're not missing out by not watching the opening either. Given it's a Disney tie-in, it's of course filled with clips from the film to substitute for actual in-game cutscenes. I of course skipped them because I've already seen the film. Many times. But if by some strange chance you're one of 3 people in the world who've never seen The Emperor's New Groove, I will briefly sum up the opening. So there's an emperor dude called Kuzco. He's not a nice person and threatens to destroy good old Patcher here's village in order to build himself a luxurious summer getaway. Meanwhile, his advisor Isma plots against him and plans to kill him and take the throne for herself. Except she gets her potions mixed up, mistaking a vial of llama transformation juice for poison. She then tries to off him by having her lackey, the ever-lovable and sweet-hearted Kronk, throw Kuzco into the river. Kronk can't bear to go through with it, however, and in a random turn of events, Kuzco ends up on Patcher's cart and winds up in his village. And that's basically where the game begins. So you're thrown straight into the action, but not before you have to sit through 20 seconds of flyby. I mean, yeah, that's not too bad, but I swear they get longer as you progress through the game. There was one that lasted 1 minute and 10 seconds. Why do I need 1 minute and 10 seconds of flyby when I'm going to see the level as I travel through it?
I can't show you the way out of the village unless you build Kuzcotopia somewhere else.
I don't make deals with pets.
Excuse me?
I don't make deals with pets.
Sorry?
I don't make deals with pets.
Okay. I'm just joking, I know what you said thanks to the power of subtitles. But this is a strange bug that always seems to happen when I play these PS1 tie-ins. It happened in Treasure Planet.
Now, Jim.
What?
Harold.
What was that? What? I'm sure it happened in Stuart Little 2 at some point.
Thankfully, your brother George has built this training course for you to train on.
I love that at the end. And I thought it was maybe because I hadn't set my emulator up correctly, but looking through YouTube, everyone else who's played this seems to have the same audio bugs. Maybe they're all emulating it too, I don't know, but if not, I'd love to know what keeps causing this to happen. Now, in terms of character control, I'm happy to say this is one of the best games I've played in that regard, at least out of the ones I've reviewed so far. Kuzco is fairly quick on his feet and able to turn on a dime, making traversing each level and avoiding hazards a thankfully simple affair. And if his moderately agile pace still isn't fast enough for you, there's even a charge mechanic that could give Spyro a run for his money. The only difference being Kuzco's charge has limited use, represented by the bar at the top left of the screen. It doesn't refill on its own, so you'll need to find these llama potions to gain more charge, and you can't completely fill the bar until you collect enough coins to do so, with 5 coins increasing it by a small amount each time. While that does sound restricting, there are so many coins scattered about the place that you'll find it difficult not to end up with a fully charged bar before you're even close to the end of the level. Not to mention it's a smart way to encourage players to explore a bit more, so they don't just zoom through every section. The game is fairly generous with its llama potions too, and some areas feel amazing to travel through, simply for the fact you have a near endless supply of llama potions at your disposal. 2 of my favourite areas that use the charge mechanic were the city section where you needed to sprint your way to a timed door before it shut, and the race involving some annoying little shit who keeps cropping up throughout the game.
Hey, guess what? I've got a red item.
I don't remember you in the film, you're dead to me. What lets The Emperor's New Groove down, however, is partly the jumping mechanics, but more so the camera and the collision. My god, the collision detection in this game is diabolical. But let's discuss the jumping first. Now, technically the jump itself is perfectly fine. Kuzco can leap a fair distance with it, and even travel further by combining it with the charge mechanic. It's actually the platforms themselves wherein the problem lies. At times they feel too far away for even Kuzco's already impressive jump to cover. If you don't wait until the very last millisecond to jump, you frequently won't make the gap. Admittedly, it's not a huge issue, as falling into the void below isn't an insta-death unless you're on your last point of health. But still, it's bloody annoying when it feels like you should have cleared a gap with no issues, only to watch Kuzco faceplant into the side of the wall instead. The camera, well, I don't think it's a surprise I have a problem with that. It seems to be a staple for every single game I review, and the clips I'm showing you on the screen right now should explain enough to you. But the collision detection. How can such a thin llama get stuck on so many things? The worst area for this was the jungle section with the guards. It's your typical sneak past the patrols before they turn around and see you, and would be used later on in another Argonaut Games title. I lost count of how many times I got caught by a guard and had to restart at the last checkpoint, simply because trying to cut corners would result in Kuzco getting stuck on them. Actually, even if I wasn't trying to cut corners, the bastard would somehow find a way to glue himself to the wall. So yeah, Kuzco's movement is fine, and his jumping can be difficult because of platforming problems, but for the most part it's okay. It's just a shame that this otherwise smooth sailing game is let down by not only the camera, but that atrocious collision detection. So the objective of each level is fairly simple. Get from point A to point B by succeeding at platforming or puzzles, avoid any hazards, and take out the enemies that get in your way by using Kuzco's flying kick ability. In order to progress further through levels and even end them, you'll need to find red idols carved into Kuzco's human likeness, which are necessary to open the various doors that block your way, which also feature Kuzco's likeness. He really is full of himself, isn't he? Actually, that's a point I want to bring up about PS1 version Kuzco. Now, if you have seen the film, you'll know that Kuzco starts off as an extremely self-centered and at times cruel ruler who is happy to talk down to and ruin the lives of pretty much everyone he meets. He threatens to destroy Patch's village. He fires Isma, who, until she plotted to kill him, had been a loyal advisor for many years, and even has an old man thrown out of his palace for breaking his groove.
No! You threw off my groove!
I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove.
By the end of the film, however, he atones for his ways by, spoilers I guess, not only risking his one and only chance to become human again in order to save Pacha, but even dropping the idea of building a summer getaway so that his newfound friend can live in peace. And while PS1 Kuzco also doesn't seem to go through with the destruction of Pacha's village, he never changes his attitude, not even by the end of the game. He's constantly rude to Pacha, commenting on his weight and frequently reminding him that he's a peasant.
Nice footwork, Chunky. That's about what I'd expect from a big, chubby peasant like ye.
I like gardens.
Mainly because they're filled with things to eat, I suppose?
And treats pretty much everyone else he comes across as complete garbage, including small children. He even launches a not quite right in the head dude who believes he's a bird straight into a rock face for the sole reason of pressing a button. Gotta progress by any means necessary, I suppose. Whilst I understand the developers were trying to bring some of film Kuzco's witty and sarcastic commentary to the game, they forgot to include the character growth that made him so likeable by the end of the movie. Here he just comes across as a complete dickhead, really. And listening to him chew Pacha out for being a stupid fat peasant for the 27th time was really beginning to grate on my nerves. It's even stranger if you watch the film clips that are included in the game. I mean, if Kuzco apparently thinks so little of Pacha, why would he risk everything to save him? There's another instance of this earlier in the game too. Bucky the squirrel will aid you in the Jungle Knight levels by guiding you to where you need to go and retrieving items for you. But once you're done with the first few levels, you're shown that admittedly hilarious scene from the film involving the balloon.
No.
I got this hand.
No, don't.
Have it back.
Ha!
I mean, yeah, it's incredibly funny, but it doesn't make sense given Bucky was just helping us out moments ago. If you're going to include clips from the film, it kind of needs to match up to what's happening in the game, else it just ends up being confusing. Anyway, back to the levels themselves. Besides the main objective of making your way to the end and not dying, there are also secrets to find and even collectibles in the form of the coins I mentioned before. Secrets can be found through a variety of ways, such as entering a crack in a wall, beating a time challenge, and even by doing random things such as drop kicking this already unconscious dude you beat up moments earlier.
He's already dead.
They usually just contain coins, but on occasion you'll find a Whompy plushie, which acts as an extra life.
It's my Whompy.
So, for those of you who haven't played The Emperor's New Groove, I'll very briefly sum up the objective of each level, or at least the ones worth mentioning. The village levels are mainly tutorial based, with the first two helping you get to grips with Kuzco's moveset, as well as the various switch and door puzzles you'll find throughout the game. The third consists of a race against the adorable oaf Kronk, and the fourth objective has apparently been ripped straight from Spyro 2.
I'm not leaving unless you hide behind that tree so you can't see me.
Only somehow it's even worse.
Huh? Stop following me.
The fourth level will also have Kuzco pitted against Isma in a, boss fight. I don't know, she kinda just threw potions at me and it was fairly obvious I needed to have them land on the switches. The fight was like over in 15 seconds anyway, so eh. Next up are the Jungle Knight levels. The first one has you collecting balloons in order to cross a river. Oh yeah, I have to mention, for some reason Kuzco seems to be deathly allergic to water, as anytime he touches it, even if it's in a small pond outside Patch's house, he takes a point of damage. Honestly, it's a wonder how he made it this far in life, but I digress. The next level is more or less the same thing, only you're required to put together a golden idol statue that's currently in pieces. Doing so will drain the water and allow Kuzco to enter the next level, but not before you have to take out that little shit on the trike once again. The next level is borderline impossible if you don't have the tapping speed and endurance to make it to the end. You have to mash buttons for an entire minute, all while the jaguars are right up your arse, and getting caught by them means insta-death and starting back at the beginning. The next few levels I personally didn't care for. It's that scene from the film where Kuzco and Patcha are tied to a log and floating downriver, only this time it goes on for about 20 bloody minutes. The first level has you getting to grips with speeding up and down and moving left and right to avoid obstacles. The second is more or less the same, except now you have whirlpools to escape from and angry monkeys throwing coconuts. At least I hope they're coconuts, dear God, let them be coconuts. The third level is a race against the one and only shitlord himself, and finally the fourth level is another fight against Isma.
Go, Piggy, go!
The next section has you back in the jungle, only it's daytime now. I have to say, the first few levels were a real doozy for me, and I was struggling to make it through without taking a significant amount of damage. Honestly though, I really enjoyed the challenge. Apart from some slightly awkward platforming, it was a breath of fresh air in a game that, up until now, had been relatively easy to get through, but the guard section can still go feck itself.
Demon Lava!
The third and final level of the jungle mainly involved the frog transformation and a bunch of switch puzzles, and let me tell you, when you finally work out the combination of jumps you need to make in order to progress further, oh, it just feels so good. The mountain levels mainly consist of platforming, but there's also the occasional boulders to avoid, a nifty little statue puzzle, and another section very similar to a Spyro 2 minigame. Next up is the city, where you'll destroy Isma's statues, be introduced to a new type of mechanic involving bullseyes and floating blocks that change position, and a lot of charging around. The last level has another boss. Yeah, I think you get by this point these aren't really fights, to be honest. I suppose it makes sense, Isma's a withered old bean who prefer not to get her hands dirty. I just feel like the boss fights could have been a little more challenging, you know? Anyway, she'll throw potions at you because even though she's a smart woman, she apparently never learns. Meanwhile, Kuzco can pick up grapes and spit seeds at the bullseyes on the platform she stands atop, making himself a path up to her. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the seed spit ability. That's a thing, you know, because he's a llama, and llamas spit, I think. Llamas spit, right? And so we move on to the Catacombs. And this right here, almost made me rage quit. It seems I have the reaction times of a snail because, try as I might, I could not adjust the cart in time to make the corners at the ridiculous speed I was going at. Not helped by the fact you can barely see a few meters ahead of you because of the awful draw distance. And then, because the developers clearly hate children, there's not only these green switches that will suddenly change the direction you steer in, i.e. left is right and right is left, but dying at any point during these sections will set you back at the beginning. There are no checkpoints on this level, and these roller coaster sections come up 3 times in total, with each one getting progressively harder. I swear I say this for every review, but thank God for save states. Because I think if I hadn't had them, these roller coaster levels combined would have taken me probably over an hour to finish due to the insane amount of deaths I experienced. In between these levels, you have your bog standard platforming and avoiding obstacles. I think it was by this point I slipped into the "are we done yet" mentality, but that could just be because these roller coaster sections completely killed the enthusiasm I had for playing this game. There's not much to see here either, which doesn't help. You know, I mocked the previous levels for having fairly boring skyboxes. Well, at least they bloody had one. I mean, there's a bit of blue fuzz down there, but the rest of this skybox is just an endless void of nothingness. There's also a very weird boss fight in which Kuzco takes on and destroys a family of stone blocks.
Hey, you're not allowed to play here.
Listen, Rockboy, I couldn't care less. I am the Emperor.
Oh no, not again.
Free the cubes. Free the cubes.
It's actually kind of disturbing in a way, not just for the fact these are talking sentient cubes with creepy faces, but also because not only does Kuzco essentially murder the childlike blocks by knocking them off the platform, but he doesn't even show mercy to their distraught father, knocking bombs into his face to the point he splits in half.
Oh no! I'm cracking up!
Oh yeah, I'm a big bad rumbling lump of rock, and I'm gonna flatten you.
Not today, pal.
What the fuck?
And just because that wasn't horrifying enough, later on there's even an oohing ghost block with a terrifying maniacal expression. Because, you know, I didn't want to sleep tonight. And finally we make it to the last few levels, taking place in Isma's lab. It's really just an amalgamation of previous mechanics. There's the usual platforming, only this time with added Crash Bandicoot side-scrolling twist. Whoa! Puzzles dotted here and there, and various transformation sections, including yet another race against Kronk whilst in tortoise form. Though I will admit, Kronk's dialogue is so innocent and sweet that it actually makes up for the monotony.
Hi. Sorry, turtles aren't allowed down here. Alright, now stay. Stay.
And then we come to yet another boss Oh wait, she's actually attacking me this time? Oh, okay, well I take back what I said previously about her not wanting to get her hands dirty. Sadly, it's as simple as the rest, only requiring you to perform a flying kick at Isma when she stops spinning like the Tasmanian devil. Cue more platforming, puzzles, and one last tango with El Shitlord, and you'll come to the very last challenge, a race against Kitty Isma along the side of the palace. Once again, incredibly simple to complete with no real challenge, and that's the game! You pick up the potion, you get the clip from the film where Kuzco drinks it and turns back into a human, and then we get an actual proper in-game cutscene where everybody's being weird and dancing.
Moo.
Oh.
Look at me, I can fly!
okay. I guess a lot of the excitement from seeing the ending is supposed to come from the film clips and having the protagonist triumph over evil, but to be honest, I wasn't feeling it. Maybe because the whole Kuzco being a knobhead and not changing his ways even by the end of the film doesn't really fit with the film clip? I don't know, but the ending just felt completely underwhelming to me. Also, can I just point out that at no point during the ending of this game does Kuzco say he's not going to build his summer getaway in Patch's village anymore. Yeah, the game is supposed to be aimed at people who've watched the film, but if, like I said, you're one of the 3 people who've never seen it, you'd probably just assume everyone was okay with Kuzco bulldozing down their homes to build a pool. Plot holes aside, however, The Emperor's New Groove on the PS1 is a fairly solid Disney game. The controls are honestly some of the best I've experienced, with only a few issues in terms of camera and collision, and while it did feel a little too long for my tastes, that's really a personal opinion. Most of the comments I've seen about the game's length state it's too short in fact, but each to their own. And even if the humour lost its charm by the end of the game for me, I'm sure kids would be bowled over by the constant witty remarks from Kuzco. I could have done without the stealth and roller coaster sections though, especially the latter. Look, I don't have the reaction time I once did as a 10-year-old, and I'm sure some of you will argue at me to get good, but you can't deny how difficult that section can be, especially on a first-time basis, and the fact you really can't see what the heck is going on due to that insanely short draw distance. Seriously, cut that bit out or improve the draw distance, fix the camera and collision detection, and I think the game could have got 5 stars, maybe 4.5 simply for the fact it doesn't really add anything new to the genre. But yeah, I can see why so many of you are fond of this game, and I just hope the next one I review is as decent as this one.
Bring it on.
Shout out to supporters Klaxon, Thomas Hinton, Jeffrey Thomas, Ray Zach, Mr. Zugador, Ross Ward, Samuel DeBoss, Poplio the Destroyer, Morendor, Trevor, Oblivion, Justin Turgerson, and James Townsend. Oh my gosh, there's so many of you now. Normally I know the list off by heart, but now I'm actually having to get the paper out and read it all. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate the support, whether it's on Patreon, whether it's on YouTube with memberships, whether you come by and watch every single video I make. I assume you do if you're donating to me, but you know, I like to say it anyway, because there are people who can't afford to donate but still want to give me support, and the fact that you guys always come back, always watch the videos, leave likes, leave comments, share the video around, that means so much to me, and it really does keep me motivated, because this last week has been especially stressful. I've just been behind on everything. It feels like I haven't caught up at all, and now I've given myself extra to do, so you know, because, you know, I just love the challenge, woohoo! But yeah, thanks once again, guys. I really, really do appreciate it, and I hope you're all having an awesome day, or evening, night, whenever you're watching this. Ta-ta!